Isn't the kid who looks like a cat here today? Morris poked his head out of the cave. The little boy with dark skin lay on the outer wall of the insect den with his bare hands like a gecko, nodding towards him. These children basically climb on the outer walls of the slum every day. This unique building in the slums is called a bug hole. From a distance, it looks like a giant glowing mound. It is named after its insect nest-like appearance. A mixture of rough gravel, sand, and a small amount of industrial waste makes up most of the insect nest. The irregular and curved internal passages inside the insect cave are connected to each other. The wider cave-like and load-bearing spaces are used as caves for poor people who cannot afford to buy houses. The Morris family lived in a cave close to the outside. The sun shines on the outer wall of the mound, and the small amount of crystals mixed in the building materials reflect the dazzling light, so the simple building gets the necessary amount of light. The boy climbing on the outer wall is called Shirtu. Children in the slums are not born with meaningful names given by their parents. After all, early death of children is quite rare and common here. For people like Shirtu who live to be around 10 years old, their parents will often either randomly give them a name used by their ancestors, or give them a less decent name based on their usual hobbies and habits, such as Shirtu. This child is known to many residents because he has been fond of rock climbing on the outer walls of steep and dangerous insect caves since he was a child. With olive skin, slightly curly long black hair, and 2 deep black eyes born in darkness, the boy has a body as strong as a stone. The lack of nutritious diet in the slums has affected the growth of his muscles, which are slender and stronger than those of his peers due to long-term exercise and rock climbing. Although Shirtu does not like to talk, he is very popular with everyone because he often takes the initiative to help the surrounding residents with physical work in exchange for a small amount of food. About a year or 2 ago, Stone, who had always been crawling around alone, suddenly had a few friends, perhaps from the surrounding slums. In addition to Shitta's younger brother, there was a little red-haired girl with freckles on her face, a strange child who still had no hair, perhaps due to the residual radioactive elements or pollution, and a pretty green-eyed boy who always wore sportswear, who impressed Morris deeply. The child with green eyes is the one who appears the least frequently. He is short and not very talkative. In the nest, Morris' sister heard her brother's question and sighed in disappointment. The anticipation on her face and the blush on her cheeks gradually faded away. Morris touched her sister's head, climbed to the opening of the cave and sat down, breathing in the fresh air and looking at the blue sky and the white clouds floating in the sky. Their cave is quite far from the ground. Due to the rapid increase in the population of the slum, the insect hole has been raised several times over the years. The cave they were assigned to as new residents took a lot of time just to climb up from the inner tunnel. Looking down from the opening of the cave, the people below were really not much bigger than insects and ants. What surprised everyone was that the stones and the children often climbed up and down at such a height without ever falling. At the same time, not far from the slums, there was a research institute on the outskirts of the city. In a huge glass petri dish, long seaweed-like hair floated in a culture fluid similar to amniotic fluid. The creature wrapped in long hair curled up into the shape of a baby, and the gills on its lower jaw slowly rose and fell with its breathing. The nameplate welded on the metal base under the creature's petri dish is engraved with the creature's codename and name, Mermaid. Number 9 stared at the video screen and read the image of the subject's brainwaves. It was obvious that the subject had entered the deep sleep cycle of REM, rapid eye movement. The new product developed by Company N, a long-term cooperative organization of the laboratory, can rewrite the memory of experimental subjects, thereby adjusting and correcting the parameters of acquired personality types. In order to prevent accidents from happening, in the month after the new data was imported, he and his team took turns to monitor the brain waves of the experimental subjects 24 hours a day. If this experiment is successful, a chimera stronger than the poison Duke may be produced. During the few minutes when Number 9 was distracted by thinking about the future, the double-layered eyelids covering the eyeballs of the subject opened very slowly, revealing 2-color, extremely bright pupils. At first glance, These eyes look like human eyes. The outermost layer is the white of the eye, followed by a very highly saturated, somewhat vivid peacock blue and a malachite green that is closer to the pupil. The deep pupil shrinks like a cat when it receives light signals from the outside world, forming a square cone-shaped slit. Before number 9 came back to his senses, the eyes had been closed, as if nothing had happened. The observation instrument did not report an error for such a short-term abnormal fluctuation. After all, there was still an observation error. "Shift change," came the cheerful voice of my partner from behind. Number 9 was relieved and turned around to leave with the bag he had prepared. Researcher number 16 is a very young girl. She graduated from a prestigious school and received a doctorate from a top professor in the industry. She was introduced to the research institute smoothly. This ordinary-looking girl has great enthusiasm for her work. She has a short student haircut that does not match her age. She has a plain face and has no particular interest in anything other than research. After proofreading and setting the parameters, number 16 opened a bag of potato chips and placed it on the table, connected it to the remote machine, and prepared to start checking the monitoring of the room that her roommate Jingzi was supposed to be responsible for. "Help me." The expression of Jingzi clasping her hands appeared in front of her eyes. "Anyway, there is usually nothing unusual, so please help me check it out. My boyfriend finally has a day off today, and I want to spend time with him." Although Jingzi always bothered her to help with a night shift remotely, but if this girl is also interested in scientific research and love, she might have a competitor for her year-end award, number 16 sighed. Jingzi is different from her, probably because of her cultural background. This girl is very passionate about appearance and love. She held a curling iron in front of the mirror, and the light in her eyes when she talked endlessly about the opposite sex was much more energetic than the stagnant eyes when she was working. After the machine was started, the naked eye VR screen in front of me gradually became clearer. Ever since the seniors wrote programs to monitor abnormalities, number 16's job has become a little boring. It was different from the fantasies she had about the institute when she just graduated. Not all explosive new discoveries are made here every day, and colleagues are not all partners who are passionate about their careers. In this kind of environment where the frog was boiled in warm water, she, a girl who was once passionate about dedicating herself to scientific research, gradually became a little lazy, although she could not be said to be desperate. However, today, the situation in the test room on the screen aroused some interest in her. Number 16 curled up in the huge chair, picked up the potato chips, watched them like a TV series, and ate them. Meanwhile, the test room. Since some of the human experiments conducted by the Institute are not so popular with humanitarian organizations, and few volunteers among the public are willing to participate, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble and ensure that there are enough experimental subjects, the leadership has signed a mutually beneficial contract with the security officers of each city a long time ago. Some prisoners and even death row inmates with serious cases can have their sentences reduced or regain their freedom by participating in experiments, while those with less serious cases, such as fighting, damaging public facilities, etc., can choose to assist in research in areas such as testing rooms. Assisting in research may sound nice, but in fact it is more like labor reform and providing free labor, things that researchers are reluctant to do, such as running errands and cleaning and other dirty work, will be counted as points according to the difficulty and written on the prisoner's record. This type of cleaning and chore work, which does not require too much risk, has lower scores and needs to be done longer to offset their sentence. However, because there's no need to worry about missing arms and legs, there are still quite a few prisoners who choose this type of work. By analogy, jobs with higher scores are more difficult and more dangerous, capped by those who may risk their lives and become experimental subjects. Being an assistant in the practice room is relatively generous in terms of points for non-body modification jobs. The so-called practice room is a room where new experimental subjects are tested for their physical fitness. Perhaps it should be called the Coliseum or the arena more appropriately. Number 16 thought while eating potato chips. The walls are soundproofed and shock-absorbed. No one knows what is going on inside except the robots that execute the orders, the researchers who observe through bulletproof glass, and technicians like Shizuko who perform video backup and data collection and analysis. The person who caught number 16's attention in the practice room was the little boy with shackles and handcuffs. He was wearing ordinary sportswear and sweatpants in the corner, and his jacket was zipped all the way up. Number 16 found that face familiar, for some reason. The delicate face like a porcelain doll, the unwavering eyes, the short dark blonde hair that reaches the chin and is slightly curly. If the boy hadn't been so petite, she would have almost mistaken him for the most powerful experimental subject, Poison Duke, she had seen in the newspaper countless times. The Poison Duke's real name is unknown, and his origins are also a mystery. According to internal rumors, the Poison Duke himself did not enter the Institute as a prisoner and become an experimental subject like the trash of society in front of him. Instead, he came from the army and was basically the top soldier in the past who voluntarily underwent transformation. However, there are several internal rumors, and the most amazing one is that he is actually a pure artificial human made through optimization of genetic engineering, and there are many spare clones of him somewhere. As one of the most successful chimeras currently, and the dream lover of countless girls, this handsome chimera is also the reason why number 16 decided to enter the Institute when she was a girl. Although Chimera's genetic modification is not guaranteed to be heritable, because his modification is extremely successful, his descendants will become very important research cases and protection targets. However, unlike other chimeras who are more happy-go-lucky, the Poison Duke's private life is quite low-key. There have been no scandal rumors over the years. So many passionate women are very excited to create many fan comics and novels featuring him and publish them on major websites. But those are things that number 16 doesn't see much. As Poison Duke's loyal fangirl for more than 10 years, she was willing to believe that Poison Duke was a straight man, and she also fantasized that one day she could meet him by chance at a scientific research institute, and then have an unexpected romantic encounter. Her mind was drawn back to the scene before her. Out of the officer's bad taste and humane considerations, every time a new preparatory subject chooses a test combat subject, they can see the reason for their imprisonment. The preliminary subject seemed to have been imprisoned for armed robbery and was quite tall and muscular. Luke, the preparatory experimental subject, entered the room and made his choice almost immediately. Murderers, arsonists, sex offenders, drug dealers. In the end, this short thief obviously seems to have the least fighting ability. The sign in front of the handsome boy read theft, and among the criminals lined up, he was the smallest and most handsome. "I choose him." Luke pointed at the beautiful boy and said to the experimenter, who was invisible to him behind the single-pane glass, "Okay, we'll start in 5 minutes." The man's steady voice came from the microphone. The beautiful boy didn't seem to understand the situation clearly. He scratched his head and looked left and right before confirming that he had been selected. The cat-like round eyes blinked, suddenly becoming a little excited from a dazed state. Looking at the man in front of him, who was a head taller than him, he sighed. "You don't need to be imprisoned for a long time for the crime of theft." Number 16 looked at this slender and beautiful boy muttering across the screen, as if she had already watched this boy who was somewhat similar to her male god being beaten into a human shape. The handsome boy's handcuffs and shackles were released with a click. As several unselected criminals filed out under the escort of robots, the door to the practice room was firmly closed. The handsome boy slowly unzipped and took off his coat. Number 16's eyes were glued to the screen without blinking, for fear of missing any detail. The plop, plop, plop. Heartbeat was getting faster and faster, and it was particularly loud in a quiet room with only experimental equipment. However, when the beautiful boy took off his coat, she realized that the beautiful boy was a girl. However, contrary to her slender appearance, apart from her chest, which was tightly wrapped with bandages to facilitate movement, her exposed figure, from her arms to her waist and abdomen, could be seen with quite prominent muscles. This kind of muscle was not the kind of girl who was too thin, but under the light at a slight angle, You can see the slightly bulging muscles on her back and the faint chocolate abs on her waist and abdomen. Although number 16 knew it was a girl over there, he still looked at the muscles and face and swallowed slightly. Start. The man's voice came from the microphone again. Before Luke could react, the thief raised his leg and kicked him in the waist and abdomen. Bending over in pain, Luke cursed and was about to fight back when his head heard a buzz, and then his throat was caught by the little girl's thin elbow. He suddenly lost his center of gravity and was thrown against the wall. Number 16 was so stunned that he forgot to eat the potato chips in his hand. The thief moved very quickly and in one go. Obviously, unlike the preparatory experimental subjects who were large but had not received any formal training, this was a guy who had received fighting training. Next, the thief stepped back slightly and did not directly choke the opponent to make him faint due to lack of oxygen. He seemed to realize that although he had the upper hand, he was still far behind in weight compared to the opponent. Before Luke could take a breath, in a flash of lightning, the boy's fist hit Luke's ribs like a rainstorm. If the camera hadn't zoomed in to see the details clearly, number 16 would have been unable to see the thief's movements clearly. Luke works for a gang of robbers and has always been accustomed to using guns. Although his arm strength, physical fitness, muscle strength, etc. are all very good, in real hand-to-hand combat and fighting, he can only be beaten unilaterally by this thief who is much shorter than him. Moreover, this woman's blows are not only fast and powerful among women, but she also specializes in hitting the weak parts of the human body. No matter how tall you are, your physical weaknesses are still the same. He didn't last more than a few minutes before Luke endured the severe pain and shouted, "Admit defeat," to the guy behind the glass. Then the test is over. The researcher announced through the glass. On the 16th, he began to read the data recorded on the wall and began to analyze the video of the battle just now. Before the robot sent by the researchers arrived, the thief continued to hit his opponent, who was already begging for mercy, as if he didn't hear him. Before he caught a glimpse of the robot next to him coming to pull the two away, the thief kneeled Luke again before pretending to be nonchalant and stopping. After Luke was taken away for treatment, the researchers spoke again on the other side of the glass. "Oh, your points have reached the standard for release from prison. You can leave." The thief named L picked up his coat from the ground, patted the dust, put it on with his head lowered, zipped it up again, turned around and left. Number 16 seemed to suddenly wake up from a dream, and blood rushed to her head. She pushed away the table and stood up. She didn't even notice that the potato chips fell to the ground. She turned around, opened the door, and started running out. C2. Lilith Zod, who had just been freed, squinted her eyes and stretched under the street light. She pulled up the hood of her jacket to cover the face that looked somewhat similar to her brother. As she expected, the familiar black car without a license plate was parked quietly in an alley a dozen meters away from the institute. She realized very early on, and got used to it, that she would always be the other child living in the shadow of her brother's radiance. I opened the door and got into the car. Without a driver, the self-driving car began to drive slowly towards home. Sod-style education is really no joke. In order to play games secretly, Lilith climbed the wall a few days ago and entered the room where her parents were locked due to their long trip. After she removed the evidence and fingerprints and opened the window to recover, she hung on the outer wall of the 8th floor apartment. When she was about to crawl back to the living room on the same floor with her arms, she was discovered by a neighbor who thought it was a thief and reported her. When she was pulled down from the wall by the firefighters, her brother rubbed his sleepy eyes, carefully opened the curtains, looked at the situation through the crack, and then returned calmly, as if nothing had happened. You must bear the consequences of what you do. This is what she and her brother have been taught since childhood. So, after her family didn't come to visit her and no one vouched for her, she consciously chose to go to the institute to work as an assistant with the highest score and no need for body modification, so she could make it on her own. Within a few minutes of beating the guy in a room, she naturally replaced her unshaven face with the brother's expressionless face. As expected, she felt much better after being released from prison. Lilith squinted her eyes and leaned back on the comfortable back seat. The soreness in her muscles caused by strenuous exercise began to take effect. After the amputation caused by the accident a few years ago, although her prosthetic limbs are made of bionic materials and high-strength alloy cores, which can be transformed into a body without feeling like her brother, the surgeon still copied some of her original nerve terminal receivers to facilitate future maintenance. Lilith did not notice the figure of the girl wearing a white research uniform chasing after her from the entrance of the research institute. Her attention was quickly attracted by her brother's face that appeared on the screen in front of her. Poison Duke is nearly 10 years older than Lilith. He has dark black hair and slightly darker dark green eyes. He frowns slightly and lowers his head while reading documents. The young officer did not look at Lilith immediately after the communication was connected. Instead, he read it slowly and gave a few instructions to the adjutant beside him before looking at Lilith. Lilith sat up straighter. "Hello, sir." She rarely calls her brother by his first name or brother when outsiders are around, and even at home she basically avoids calling her brother that way. When the adjutant's footsteps went away and the sound of the door closing was heard in the background, the Poison Duke spoke with a bit of disgust. "My hair is cut so short, I don't look like a girl." Lilith shrugged, strengthening the concept that women should have a female appearance in the eyes of people like her brother because they are naturally weaker than men physically and have lower social status than men. She has no value in admiring her. From being silent and completely obedient to all his arrangements as a child, to gradually becoming more self-aware and even resisting in recent years, she realized that the description "not girlish" was, in a sense, more of a compliment to her. She didn't want to be like a soulless doll, obediently being his puppet. Being caught together with that group of trash and sent to the security center for discipline. "You really refresh my understanding of what you can degenerate into." The tips of Poison Duke's 10 fingers touched each other, forming a triangle with both hands. Lilith deliberately stared at those lifeless eyes, pulled up her sleeves, and raised her arms. "I am a disabled person, and it is normal to have some mental problems. Waste is waste." The man opposite just said, "Oh," lowered his head quite indifferently, and started to read the remaining documents. Amidst the sound of turning pages, Lilith silently lowered her arms. In such silence, she felt like a fish out of water. The air she breathed was extremely stagnant, and the strong pressure on her chest made her suffocate. "I have a meeting in a few minutes." Duke Poison raised his head. "To make a long story short. 1. Grow your hair long. 2. Stop doing these things that embarrass the Sod family." Lilith seemed not to hear, and allowed him to exit the communication unilaterally, closed her eyes, and leaned back on the chair quite tiredly. "Where is the prison? The only difference is whether the cage can be seen or not." My mind goes back to a few months ago. That was her second brush with death after an accident. 1 second she was on the glider breathing the fresh air, with extremely high oxygen content produced by the wild growth of vegetation in the radiation zone outside the satellite city due to the gradual sparse human presence. The next second, she only felt the strong vibration of the glider. Several partners in front turned their heads and looked at her in horror. The support belt broke and fell in an instant. The rapid fall created a strong wind that blew her hair around. She looked at the blue sky and the rapid spread of the aircraft's fire, and her heartbeat accelerated wildly. There was only one thought left in her head. It was finally over. I don't know how long it took before she woke up from the severe pain. The sight is boundless green vegetation and the blue sky. The chirping of birds came from the forest, and the fresh smell of vegetation flowed down her nose into her lungs. She coughed a few times, and there was a thick rust-like taste of blood in her throat and mouth. Not far away, you can see several pyramid-shaped irregular buildings towering into the sky. She confirmed that her spine, brain, and non-artificial internal organs had not been irreparably damaged, and struggled to sit up. The thermal sensor reminded her that there were several non-ean organisms within a 10-meter radius behind her. Judging from their outlines, they seemed to be ordinary humans. "Are you coming from the city?" A boy's voice came from behind. Lilith responded hoarsely. The deep trees were being cleared, making a rustling sound, and several children wearing rough cotton clothes or clothes made of animal skins came into her sight. The one who spoke was the leading child, who was much taller and stronger than the other children. Tan skin, slightly curly long black hair, and bright eyes full of wildness and vitality. I am a stone. A boy about the same age as her walked over and sat on the ground. Under his leadership, several smaller children behind him also gathered around and sat down, staring at her with curious eyes. Although she just became familiar with them, the search and rescue boat came to the crash site of her aircraft and found her. Lilith still became friends with these slum children and often took the high-speed train in the underground tunnel to come and play with them. The way of playing in the slums is also quite novel to her. Climb up with bare hands along the building called Insect Cave, which is piled of industrial waste and earth and rocks. When you get to the top, you can see the satellite city and the main city in the distance. Lilith, who was regarded as nothing at home and had been silent for a long time, became the Elle who knows many things surrounded by these children. For the sake of caution, she still did not tell these children her full name, and the children in the slums were not surprised by her name because everyone around them had random names. Shurshur was particularly curious about everything she said. His elder brother serves in the satellite city police station and is considered very promising among the local children. Therefore, Shurtu very much hopes that he can embark on this path in the future, become a peace officer like his brother, live in a satellite city, and no longer have to worry about not having enough to eat. I wonder how those children are doing since I didn't go to see them this week, Lilith thought. The bald child had very obvious deformities. Lilith would occasionally go to them with food and medicine. The surrounding residents seemed to be accustomed to this. Although the residual radiation does not have much impact on most adult locals, this does not mean that there are no children who are deeply affected by it. In their view, it is normal for pregnant women to occasionally give birth to malformed fetuses. It is very normal for children not to grow up. Ironically, the phenomenon of actively accelerating mutation through transformation in the city and having a chance of becoming a chimera happens every day in the radiation zone. It is just an experiment of nature, cruel and uncontrollable, and will not give the luxury of modifying the genes that are designated. The chance of successful transformation of chimera in the laboratory is about 60%. The slums are populated by a large number of people and are the most bloody natural selection. Residents who really cannot compete for the right to live in wormholes in radiation-free zones can only live in areas where trace amounts of radiation still exist. Perhaps less than 10 out of 100 irradiated children survive, and among the surviving children, those who acquire beneficial mutations and are called successfully evolved are even rarer. If such children want to get ahead, obtain the right to live in a satellite city, and become free citizens, they can choose to enter the arena. There are no rules in the arena. In order to change their destiny, many people have paid the price with their lives, and those who win in the fight, such as Shitta's brother, are often the strongest among the strong. Lilith has met several sergeants who were born in the gladiatorial field under her brother. The eyes of those people are different from those of soldiers born in ordinary satellite cities. They are so sharp that they can look directly into your soul through your flesh and blood. The outline of a human figure gradually appeared on the wall. The two huge Doberman pinschers he was holding noticed something strange. They quickly stood up and barked at the wall in front of them, trying to break free from the rope and rush forward. "Sit," the man ordered impatiently. As the two dogs sat back down obediently, the hands holding the leash suddenly relaxed a lot. The man in military uniform sighed, raised the lighter in his hand, struck it several times, and finally lit it, holding the cigarette in his mouth. As he squinted his eyes and started puffing away happily, the human figures on the wall gradually became clearer. The human form gradually changed from the same brick-red background as the wall. The color difference gradually became stronger, and the shape and outline gradually became clearer. A strange human body covered with green scales stood against the wall. "I thought your dog had already remembered my scent, Julius," The weirdo made a hoarse voice in his throat and looked warily at the two dogs staring at him with bared teeth. The man raised his eyebrows slightly and was not in a hurry to answer. He waited until the smoke gradually dispersed and then slowly pulled the rope to signal the two dogs to move closer. There was intermittent, soft piano sound coming from the metal building in the distance. The weirdo looked in that direction, opened his breathing hole, took a deep breath, and the two hole-like structures on his head where the ears should have been moved. It has nothing to do with whether you know each other. It's just that they don't like you. The man smiled, leaned forward, and shook the ashes from the edge of the glass table next to him. The weirdo sneered when he saw the way he was smoking carefully, with a look like a joke in his eyes. It's a real nuisance to ban smoking in buildings. There are so many flammable materials. Julius leaned back comfortably in his chair. I can't afford that responsibility. The weirdo saw that although the two dogs were still grinning and whispering threats at him, they were still staying in Julius's hands. He pulled out the chair on the other side of him and sat down. His arms and body leaning on the chair changed into the same color as the chair at an extremely fast speed, blending into the chair as if they were air. As he gradually melted into the chair, the two dogs suddenly stopped whining and looked left and right in confusion, trying to smell the strange man's scent. The weirdo, who was a descendant of the lizard man, successfully developed chameleon-like abilities after being transformed. Not only can he perfectly blend into the environment visually, but the smell and temperature can also change to match the surroundings. So even dogs with extremely sensitive senses of smell can hardly detect his presence. Your abilities are really unique. Julius smiled and said to the air around him, not only have the two Doberman pinschers been trained to improve their sense of smell, but they are also genetically optimized offspring. Their sensitivity to smell is far beyond that of normal canines. Moreover, the lizard man Cameron knew that these two dogs were different from pet dogs. They usually fed on raw meat, and their skulls and claws were mixed with alloys, cutting iron like clay. Once the two dogs lose control, or if Julius lets go, they don't mind becoming their extra meal. After confirming his absolute safety, Cameron's hoarse voice rang directly in Julius's brain. Why did your dog escape at this time? Same reason you came out. Did you also receive the reward from that guy? Ulysses nodded while holding a cigarette in his mouth. All citizens in this district of Satellite City woke up this morning and received the same news. The latest experimental product of the Institute, Merman, escaped from the heavily guarded laboratory before personality adjustment, memory formatting, and reintroduction. Residents should lock their doors and windows at home. This creature is extremely dangerous and uncontrollable. Please do not try to approach it. If you find any traces related to the mermaid, please report it to the nearest district chief or the police chief. If you provide clues, you can get 2 months of food stamps for one person. Ulysses and Cameron, who are the police officers of the area around the laboratory, received the news last night. Their superiors ordered them to capture as many living bodies as possible, and the reward was 2 platinum coins. The sheriffs who received the news were all very jealous of such a high reward. At the end of the gold standard era, currencies made of platinum and other precious metals were popular in most areas, and platinum was one of the most valuable. Criminals are rampant in the most populous satellite city, where the struggle for survival is extremely fierce. After people realize the importance of life safety, sheriffs and sergeants have become quite popular professions. Due to the dangerous nature of the profession and the large demand, superiors have also introduced a policy of high salaries to support integrity. The capture of prisoners is graded according to the degree of danger, and rewards are given according to the grade. Merfolk have a danger rating of 3, which is very close to the highest rating in Wanted. The reason why it is dangerous is mainly because although it is a mammal inspired by whales, in order to be able to perform high-pressure underwater tasks, its bone density and strength are far superior to other chimera based on land creatures. In other words, if it is attacked by a mermaid, even if it is padded casually, the force is likely to be able to break the exoskeleton configured by the police officers and directly crush the bones and organs. The target subject had thick, waist-length hair that had not yet been trimmed. The position above the waist does not have any overt gender characteristics. In order to reduce resistance, the muscles that tend to be more streamlined are distributed in an inverted triangle shape on the human-like part. The position below the waist is entirely made of bionic skin and alloy prostheses wrapped in functional pipes. It changes into a fishtail shape with an alloy skeleton in the water and takes a normal human form when walking on land. It is made based on the markwort mask and the average face of the total population. Cameron sighed. In the dynamic picture, as the water in the culture medium fluctuates, the expressionless face of the mermaid stands out. In order to obtain the love and help of the local residents to the greatest extent possible when performing tasks, the latest batch of chimera models, or modified humans, have been modified to the greatest extent possible by the Institute to get closer to the theoretical, most beautiful face of mankind. This escaped mermaid, in order to reduce the huge noise that its high-density body would inevitably produce, such as vibrations on the ground, would most likely move near the water. It was no coincidence that the two veterans, Cameron and Ulysses, met near the sewage treatment plant in the satellite city in the middle of these water bodies. It is said that Poison Duke's sister happened to be near the crime scene. If Ulysses could see, or anyone could see Cameron now, he should have noticed that his snake-like and lizard-like eyes were fixed on Ulysses, as if he was preparing to discern some clues from the subtle changes in his expression. It is rumored that Ulysses, who served in an elite combat unit, had a good relationship with the mysterious Duke of Poison. Ulysses rubbed his temples and frowned. Two events happen one after another, and most people will have the illusion that these two events are causally related. That's it. Cameron was quite disappointed. Ulysses' brain was programmed to only accept information and not allow anyone but himself to read it. Although many people, including Cameron, have tried to hack into his brain, they have all failed. Therefore, I still can't figure out what this average-looking man, who almost always gets the highest year-end bonus and the Medal of Honor, is thinking. Although there is no strict hierarchy, there are 7 chimeras that are generally considered to be the strongest and most successfully transformed. The Poison Duke was named after Caesar Borgia, a famous conspirator in history who is famous for his use of poison. This modified man is almost immune to all biological toxins, most viruses and bacteria, so he is often used as a weapon of mass destruction to release biological and chemical weapons. At the same time, there are quite a few poisonous assassinations where he is suspected to be a suspect. Since Chimera specializes in different fields and has different abilities, the ranking of the remaining 6 and whether they can be regarded as the strongest Chimera is quite controversial in various forums and websites. However, including the Poison Duke, the 5 Chimeras, codenamed Genghis Khan, Odin, Queen Marie, and Lucifer, are basically included in most of the strongest lists without any dispute. Although these dignitaries are quite secretive about their family backgrounds and other privacy issues out of concern for their family's safety, in order to increase sales and click-through rates, various media outlets have exposed several other family members and made guesses, but they know almost nothing about the Poison Duke's family. But this is inevitable. Poison Duke and other chimeras have made many enemies because of their missions. Countless people from various countries hold grudges against him, and many want to retaliate. Athena's family had received threatening letters and had been added to the Witness Protection Program, as well as several other Chimera family members who had suffered misfortune, so his complete silence on his family could be considered excusable.